The two positions of real concern for the US men's national team going into the World Cup are goalkeeper and center back. Now, goalkeepers is another topic for another time. Center backs is a different situation. We have a lot of center backs. The problem is that the majority of them are either mediocre, aging, or just plain bad. That may be about to change, though. The American revelation of the 25-26 season is Noahkai Banks, the 19-year-old center back who plays for Augsburg in the Bundesliga. Today, I'm going to talk about who this guy is, his strengths and weaknesses, his possible ceiling, and I'm going to try to answer the question, should he start for the US at the World Cup? What up, guys? I'm Pete, host of the 11 Yanks Show. Hit that like button to help this video get some traction, and hit subscribe if you're new. If you are joining the American soccer bandwagon right now, you're at the best possible time. You're on the precipice of a really amazing time in American soccer. We have the World Cup here. Our players are better than ever. This will continue to get better. If you look at some of our youth players that are coming through the ranks, it's a really exciting time. So hit subscribe to be a part of this journey, and thanks for watching. So Noahkai Banks is an American-German kid who was born in Honolulu, Hawaii, and moved to Germany when he was 7 years old. He's been in the Augsburg Academy since he was a child, and he made his debut earlier in 2025, actually, right after he turned 18 years old in January. This is important because our best center back right now, Chris Richards, didn't make his debut in the Bundesliga until he was 20, and Banks is 2 years ahead of that curve. Now, granted, Chris Richards was with Bayern Munich at the time, and it's a lot harder to make your debut for a team like Bayern than it is for a team like Augsburg, but my point is, Richards didn't really become a regular center back until he was 20 years old and went to play for Hoffenheim, and that's when he became a starter, whereas Noahkai Banks actually became a starter for Augsburg before he even turned 19. Now, this is not to slag off Chris Richards in any way. It's just to show you a comparison of what this guy's ceiling could look like in terms of where his development is right now. It's also extremely rare for teenage center backs to get minutes in the top 5 leagues. We see it more commonly with strikers, midfielders, wingers, sometimes even fullbacks. But because center back is such an experience-heavy position, it's understandable that most teams don't really trust teenagers there. So it's doubly a big deal for Noahkai Banks to be getting as many minutes as he has been getting with Augsburg. Oh, goal! Weston McKennie, goal! Oh, I'm watching the Juve game in the Champions League, Juve Benfica, and Weston McKennie just scored their second goal. But back to the topic. I was going to say, in terms of center backs in the Bundesliga, there are only 2 teenage center backs who have gotten more minutes in the Bundesliga this season than Noahkai Banks. They are Karim Koulibaly at Werder Bremen and Luka Vuskovic at Hamburg. Now, it's one thing to be playing for Augsburg. It's another thing to be playing well. Let's take a look at some of Noahkai Banks' stats. Okay, so let's start out with passing here, and I'm just going to tell you guys right now, he's the best passing center back we have. The only one who could really challenge him right now is Tim Ream. Tim Ream is still a very, very good passer of the ball, particularly with his balls over the top. The problem with Tim Ream is that he has declined. I mean, the guy is almost 40 years old and is no longer the defensive force that he used to be, mainly because of his age and also returning to MLS, but he's still a very good passer of the ball. Banks definitely has a higher ceiling than Tim Ream in terms of his passing range, but right now I'd say it's close. Here you talk about key passes. He's got 0.3 key passes per game. That's about 1 every 3 or so games. You don't really pay a lot of attention to that because center backs' key passes is not something that is a big measure of how well they're playing out of the back or how well they're distributing into midfield, which is their primary job. You look at his accurate passes, it's about 90%. Accurate in his own half, it's 94%. So he's very ball secure. And even when you talk about accurate in the opposition half, it only drops to 86%. That's still a very good number for a center back. Long balls are roughly about 3 per game, and then about 2 of them end up being accurate. So about 66% of his long balls are accurate. Accurate chip passes, maybe 1 per game. I think that's one area of his game that he can continue to improve. Is on the ground, he can pass through midfield. Like, he can absolutely break lines with his passing. It's his balls over the top. That's sort of one area where you feel like he can do better. Defending-wise, his team has 3 clean sheets. Augsburg have not been the best. They're fighting relegation this year. I don't think they're going to get relegated. But he's got 0.7 interceptions per game, 2.2 tackles, recovers about 2.5 balls per game, does have a tendency to get dribbled past at times. And I'll talk a little bit about that. As far as duels won, he wins about 5 duels per game, which is about 60%. Ground duels is 61%, and it drops slightly to aerial duels at about 55%. For a guy who is 6'3" and continuing to grow, I think that's an area of his where he can improve. I'm not a big fan of New Year's resolutions because I don't think they usually have long-term impact. We just don't keep up with them. I also think it's hard to make resolutions to meaningfully change things about yourself if you don't know who you are, right? For me, there's only so much thinking something out that I can do in my own head. At some point, I like to have a sounding board or someone to talk it out with. And that's where therapy really helps. It isn't a quick fix, but it's a steady habit that helps you to understand yourself and to challenge yourself and grow over time. Now, knowing where to start with therapy can be tricky, but BetterHelp is a trusted sponsor of the channel, and they're a great starting place for getting therapy in 2026. You go to the website, you fill out the questionnaire, and they'll match you with a therapist in a matter of days. Join the 6 million people who have joined BetterHelp, the platform you can trust. Click the link in the description or go to betterhelp.com/11yanks and you'll get 10% off your first month of therapy. Now, stats don't tell us everything. They're a good measure of how a player is playing, but they always need to be combined with the eye test, watching how they play, because stats can be relatively meaningless without the eye test. From watching Noahkai Banks play, though, I would say the stats are fairly accurate. This is a guy who's very tall. He's very quick. He's got a languid pace. He doesn't always look so explosive, but he's got a long stride, and that makes him very, very fast. He isn't the quickest out of the gate, but he oftentimes makes up for it with his long strides. This is a guy who's a very good passer of the ball, and he reads the game very, very well for a 19-year-old center back. As far as his weaknesses go, I already mentioned that he can improve his passing over the top. I think concentration lapses is an area where we still see him at times lose concentration and just maybe be a second or two late to make a decision, and that will hurt the team, especially as the speed of play gets higher and higher as he continues to grow as a player. And then at times, I think just being a little bit too casual. There are moments where he's a step slow to approach the ball or doesn't always get as tight to players as he should, allowing for dangerous shots even in dangerous areas, and that's an area of his game I still think he needs to clean up. Now, these don't worry me in the long term because they are emblematic of young players. Like, these are common problems that can be fixed with experience. A young player having that is not something that worries me. They do, however, worry me in the short term because we're talking about the World Cup. Noahkai Banks is going to be an incredible defender for the U.S. men's national team for the next 15 years. I can promise you that right now, provided he doesn't get, badly injured. But the question that we're asking ourselves in this video, should he start at the World Cup? Our center back pool is filled with uncertainty. Tim Ream is old and slow and clearly on the decline. Mark McKenzie has been very good for Toulouse, but tends to be error prone for the US, tends to give you at least one shocking mistake per game, so I wouldn't necessarily rely on him. Austin Trusty has not been tested at a high level. Miles Robinson has never been tested at a high level and is a shockingly bad defender outside MLS. And even sometimes in MLS, shouldn't even be with the national team, frankly. And then, of course, there's Chris Richards, who is our best center back, but even he is not exempt from the occasional error. He also isn't the quickest. And when you're playing a high line, you need center backs that can play in defensive transitions, especially if you don't get enough pressure on the ball at times and the opponent can play balls in behind. You have to be able to defend on the turn. Chris Richards is not the greatest at that. We saw that against Ecuador, where he got turned a little bit too easily. But the point is, our center back pool is not great. Enter Alex Freeman. Alex Freeman has been a right back for Orlando, but has recently been tried by Poch in a back three on that right-hand side. And I actually prefer that role for him because I don't think he's the most technical fullback. He's certainly not a Serginho Dest or even a Tim Weah, but he does have the raw speed and athleticism that you want from a center back, particularly a center back defending on the turn. And he is still young. He's just 21 years old. I think Alex Freeman has a higher ceiling as a center back than as a fullback. Also, in the back three that we play, Poch asks that right center back to get quite a bit higher than the other two and support the wing back and get involved in the play. And in order to do that, you have to be very, very quick in transition to drop back. I don't think Noahkai Banks fits that role. So I would actually start Alex Freeman over Noahkai Banks in that back three. Well, Pete, would you then start Noahkai Banks in that left center back role? He hasn't played there for Augsburg, and you're asking a guy who's already quite inexperienced to now play a different position with different challenges. Not to mention, your back line now becomes extremely young and untested. If your oldest center back is 26 years old and the other ones are 19 and 21, you're asking for trouble in a tournament format like the World Cup. So answer the question, Pete. Should he start at the World Cup or not? Here's what I'll say. I think he should go to the World Cup. Absolutely. No question about it. I think we should try him in one or two of those games in March. I think we should try him next to Chris Richards against either Belgium or Portugal, preferably Portugal, because I want to see what this guy looks like against really good teams. Or maybe you start him against Belgium. That's fine. I just want to see what he looks like and if he is ready. And if he's not ready, that's okay. He can still go to the World Cup. Maybe you try him again in May in one of those two friendlies that we're going to play before the World Cup starts. I'm open to starting Noahkai Banks in the World Cup, but there are concerns about his readiness and experience for that level. That being said, there are concerns for all of our center backs. That's it from me, guys. Let me know what you think. Would you start Noahkai Banks at the 2026 World Cup or not? Have a great one. Hit that like button before you go. Thanks again to BetterHelp for sponsoring this video. I'll talk to you guys soon.